point of getting into long form was so that I don't have to like snare people in the first 5 seconds. Not even first 2 or 3 seconds, because you always have to say something slightly inflammatory, which it's like, it's the hustle. I got into a lot of trouble because of that recently, which I haven't even, this will be the first time I'm mentioning it, but.
This is about the coldest cold open I can imagine, but I'm going to begin today's episode, probably aside from the little teaser clip you just saw, with a bit of rambling out of left field. Throughout doing this podcast, of which there are now, I believe this will be the 37th episode, the most difficult part, the most surprising part, the most challenging part, the most insufferable part at times is recording these introductions. And the reason being is, for me at least, and certainly for many others, speaking to yourself or speaking to a camera, which is to say, pretending you're speaking to somebody who's there, is extraordinarily difficult. So you would all laugh at me if you saw how long I've been sitting here trying to record this introduction. With that said, welcome to the Wiser Tomorrow podcast. Very happy to be back. I haven't uploaded in something like 5 or 6 months. That's for a number of reasons. The first is that I moved. So for subscribers, you may notice I am in a different space. I love this space. This is, again, in my new home. And this is an office space that I've converted into an office and a studio. It's better equipped than what I was working with previously. And I just think it's a more suitable space for many reasons, which hopefully you'll see with new content. I don't want to ramble too long, so I just want to say, again, happy to be back. I'm here to stay. The regular content will return essentially as soon as I can find guests that are interested in speaking with me. And in the meantime, I do want to expand the scope of Wiser Tomorrow a little bit and go beyond the podcast conversations and into more traditional YouTube type of content, other type of content, solo podcasts, still suitable for podcatchers. So plan to see some experimental stuff in the future, but of course the podcast will remain the bread and butter. So without further ado, please welcome ModernDay Eratosthenes, otherwise known as Ashley.
In my internet sleuthing in preparing for this conversation, I saw your appearance on the Rebellious podcast, I think is the name of it.
Yeah.
So have you been getting a lot of these requests or few and far between for the moment?
Generally podcasts, I don't, the requests that I get for podcasts are, I don't know why this happens so much, but I get a lot of religious channels. And yeah, and I'm always pretty honest with them where I'm like, I'm not going to entertain you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to, it's not that I'm purposely playing devil's advocate. It's just what you believe and what we know are not two sides of the same coin. They have nothing to do with each other. And I'm not going to sit here and act like your astrology is, has any ground in real, maybe 2% of it has some real mathematical basis. And the rest is just absolute psychological bullshit. So I'm pretty honest where I'm like, I'm not going to entertain it. If you're okay with that, and I'm also not confrontational. Like if someone starts yelling at me, I'm just like, like I'm not gonna be like, no, you're like. So I get a lot of those, and they generally don't want to talk to me after I give them the whole, I'm not gonna play ball with you. Like I went to Catholic school as a kid. I was heavily indoctrinated in Boston in the system during the child pedophilia era. Like I have tons of gripe with organized religion. So I am like the last person you want to have on this. So yeah, generally I I say no a lot because of that. So as long as it's like not religious or astrology or people who I can tell just want to pick a fight with me, then I'll do it. But generally they want to pick a fight, talk theology or something like that. So yeah.
You think that they're trying to pick a fight, or do you think that for whatever reason they think that you might be sort of an ally to provide a scientific backing to whatever they're interested in?
No, I'll watch some of the videos and it's just the host will be slightly confrontational, which is okay. I mean, it's okay to be challenged, but they're bad challenges. They're ones that,
there's a way to do it and a way not to do it.
Yeah, you have to show up to play ball and you have to bring some evidence with you. Otherwise, like, what are we doing? It's just, yeah, I don't know. But generally the religious people, that's really weird. There was a big channel, actually. It was like, I think like the third highest podcast channel. It happened to be like It was somebody who was super religious and somebody who wasn't. And I was like, oh, that could be interesting. But I watched some of those episodes and it was just very, yeah. So I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. You know, it's not my vibe.
So I saw you posted a blog post, I think in January, about like the scientific community's sort of obligation to take the same principles we apply to everything else and apply
Yeah.
it to religion. So
Yeah.
this was actually one of the things I wanted to talk to first, because there is that I'm in the same sort of situation where I'm very non-confrontational, but
Yeah.
it sounds like we share the same opinions about religion. And that's sort of an issue because, you know, I guess we should be more confrontational, or at least, you know, try
I
to do
know.
it the right way, but push back. But it's tough. It's tough
It
not
is.
to just say, you know, screw it.
Because if we don't do it, then it's the loudest people that do it. And they're not always the best prepared to say something because they're pure rage, pure emotion, pure response to stimuli. And it's like, you know, I am working on it. I am trying to figure out the right way to approach all of that and to talk about it without getting worked up because, you know, especially in New England, it was traumatizing back in the day, the stuff they used to do to us, you know? So it's like, oh, I really don't know how I'm going to talk about this without it's if you're not a religious person, it's just psychotic. And I think one of the best examples I've ever heard was one guy saying he was non-religious, but the person he was talking to was, I don't know, Christian or Catholic or something, like one of the major ones. And the non-religious guy was like, I just believe in one less person than you, one less God. You don't believe in anything with Buddhism. You don't believe in anything in the Quran. You don't believe anything in Judaism, and neither do I. And I just don't believe the one more that you do. Like it's like, you know exactly what it feels like to not believe something's real. And I just believe that in addition to yours. And I just feel like in 1,000 years we're gonna look back on it like it's Greek mythology. You know, like Zeus controlled the weather. Like it's just madness, you know, and it's like, you know, God created math, and it's like, all right, let's. I'm okay with the term as like a vague, as a word filler for I don't know, insert here, and we have this product. I'm okay with that because like you don't know, we'll never know, and I'm okay with that admittance of ignorance. It's when the people are like, no, it's this God who did this thing on December 25th, you know, and you're just like, all right, well, that's when you start to lose me. That's like,
No, it's true. The other
it's like,
thing is it's that there's such a fundamentally different starting point, and there's so many assumptions baked in that a lot of the time, like the issue that I've had, at least in like the Christian context, is people are so quick to cite the Bible in one way or another, and it's sort of like I don't. That's not, as you said, it's sort of like bringing a big book of Greek mythology and saying, well, you know, Zeus did this though, so how do you? It's like, well, yeah, but I don't
right.
accept where you're, you know, the source material and many other things. But it's also interesting that it seems that sort of the higher you go up the academic totem pole, or like, you know, the more prestigious the pedigree, the less likely people are interested in actually addressing these conversations. And I get it from the perspective of you're some, you know, fancy tenured professor and you have a career in a lab to worry about and so on.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's more than that. It's not just a matter of professional self-preservation. It's also, I
Fear.
don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You think it's mostly fear that's keeping people
Uh,
from doing it?
for my end, it is, and I think it's because I know exactly how deep the web of Catholicism goes in this country, and there are other branches in Christianity and Protestants, and you know, everybody in the South, and I know how deep it goes. I know what it feels like to believe that stuff. I know how devout so many people are. And so I know exactly what they're going to say to anything that I say because I used to think like them and now I think this way. And I think a lot, especially older people, because now religion's kind of fading, right? You don't see a lot of parents our age putting their kids in Catholic school unless it's a really great private school or something like that. And it's for the educational reasons or something. But generally, you don't really see our generation like pushing kids into church and stuff. So I feel like the older the person, the more likely they have a background in some organized religion. And so they have opinions on it and don't want to go anywhere near it because they know what the response is going to be. So why waste your time? You already know what they're going to say because it's what you would have said. And it's just talking to your childlike self. And yeah, I just, I guess I don't want to go in circles and I don't want to be attacked they're ready to go. They're ready to throw down, depending on the religion and the branch and the area. Some of them are really ready to go, and it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to deal with you. You're psycho. Like, yeah.
I know it's scary, and I think a lot of people underestimate just how it's very people are very dismissive to say, yeah, I mean the Catholic Church can be scary, but it's not like they're going to come after you. And it's like, yeah, I mean nobody's saying the
Roe v.
Vatican is
Wade.
going to send, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all,
Yeah, they'll do it.
the scope of how they imagine the religious response, like what it would look like, is actually much different in
Yeah.
reality than I think in
They
conception.
do come for you because they're again, I mean, I only know my own experiences, but I went to two different religious schools growing up for years, and both of them, one was just Christian denomination. I don't know what that one was. It wasn't Catholic. And then I went to like a straight up Catholic school. And both of them do believe the more people you convert, the better off you are in heaven. And in the Christian school, they literally showed us pictures of mansions and like, here's how big your mansion will be if you convert X amount of people. It was absolute. I mean, to indoctrinate a bunch of children into that concept, especially like poor kids. This was a very poor area, like in the southwestern outside of Boston area. Most of those kids are there for like pity cases, scholarships. Like, this isn't a very nice school. It's a lot of poor kids. And when you tell a bunch of poor kids that if it's like a pyramid scheme, you convert a bunch of people to this church and you get this big mansion when you die, it's just sorry, it's fucking insane. And like I know how desperate they are to convert people to their cause. And then there's the psychological aspect of it where you want people to believe what you believe because it's justification and you feel like you're being verified and validated, and it's like, my opinion's right because this person believes it too. So you just want your ideology to spread because it's a reflection of what you think is right. So there's multiple reasons on multiple different levels on why they're so obsessed with just suffocating us all with their belief structures. And this is not just Catholicism or Christianity. They all do it to some extent. I just personally have more experience with Catholic and Christian, and I know what they're like, so I can speak on that, but they all do it. And that's like a sign that maybe something's up.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's there's nothing else that is, it's not even protected. Again, it's weird. For a while, I remember maybe a decade ago when atheism was on the rise, and there were content creators talking about it, and people, the secular community, not that it's a very well defined community, but everyone who wasn't religious was speaking about it more and more comfortable sort of identifying that way and making those arguments. But I'm not sure if it's sort of the vegan effect where it sort of got out of hand and people just it became obnoxious and started pushing people away. Because nowadays it feels like, you touch atheism online and it's sort of just a fedora tipping kind of cringe. Nobody really likes talking about it. It's beating a dead horse. But at the same time, it may be more important now than even at the time when all of that sort of popped off.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the industry too. Not the industry, but like whatever group of people you're talking about. Because I've noticed in the STEM community, we never mention it. Literally nobody ever talks about it. Even if something happens, I don't know, if the James Webb even if we saw aliens, I'm telling you, nobody's first thought in the STEM community is going to be like, but what does Jesus think? Like, it's just not where our brain goes. So we don't talk about it a whole lot. It's always the outside of the STEM community that wants us to be challenged all of the time. So I think if you ask, I don't know, I always get atheist and agnostic mixed up. Which is the one that believes in absolutely nothing, period?
Atheism. And
Okay.
agnosticism is the one is a little. Frankly, it's sort of a. I've never understood the distinction. I mean, literally, I suppose I understand the distinction, but it seems like agnosticism, because I think anyone who's gonna proudly, declare their atheism is probably very well aware of the scientific method and how it works, and it's probably in the same way that you'd say, gravity is definitely real, but still, it goes without saying that there's, maybe we'll learn more, it will be refined and revised to some extent, and my understanding will change. So agnosticism feels a little bit of a, just in case, let me just keep one foot in the door, or at least be polite enough to say it's not totally crazy. Maybe.
Yeah. Because I just don't think about it. I
Yeah,
don't really care. It's
probably
one of
the
the
best way to go about it.
Yeah, I just don't care. I mean, honestly, if for whatever reason there was absolute evidence that everything in the Bible was 100% true and the apocalypse came and like all of it and Jesus descent and all that and they're on horsemen and I'd be like, oh, I guess it was real. Like, I'm not gonna fight it and be like, nah, nah. Like, I'm like, here's the evidence. All right, I guess I was wrong. Like, and then I changed my mind, and it's really just that easy. It's when I think you fight it too much, even when there is evidence, where it becomes absolutely insane. Like, I would love to see what would happen if we found single-celled organisms on a moon or a planet somewhere, because it's like, well, now what are you gonna do? Because Earth is so special because it's supposed to be the chosen place where all the prophets are and all the, what are you going to do if there's single-celled organisms?
Hello, I hope you're enjoying my conversation with Ashley, but I have a quick and important announcement. Wiser Tomorrow is a passion project, and one that has yet to earn me a dime. In fact, it's been quite the opposite. And I'm not complaining. I didn't start this project looking for a cash cow. But at the same time, my hope that the podcast can begin generating at least some revenue is not something I'm ashamed to admit, as this would mean more resources to improve the show and justification to spend more time reaching out to guests and having interesting conversations. But with only a modest viewership, it's difficult to find partners that see potential in such a collaboration, and more importantly, that I feel make a good fit for the podcast. So for now, I have 2 rules. 1, nothing that costs money, and 2, nothing from the big and notorious sponsors. I have no clue where this podcast will take me, but for now, it's amazing to have a tight-knit community, and I want to foster that in every way that I can. So today, I'm happy to announce Wiser Tomorrow's first sponsor, created by another independent creator and perfect for taking these discussions and opening the floor to you all, Evanser. Evanser.org is an evidence aggregator where users crowdsource the best evidence on both sides of empirical yes or no questions. There's no suppression of minority opinion, and evidence is open to public rebuttal, testing its strength, and exposing any weaknesses. This creates a decentralized library where you can easily find summarized, top evidence to quickly become knowledgeable on the topics you care about. Evanser is an open platform, and your participation is welcomed. You can contribute evidence and track how it sways opinion, promote strong evidence to make it more visible, or create your own inquiry starting with just a simple yes or no question. Previous attempts at alternative news, information, and social media platforms have quickly devolved into echo chambers worse than partisan legacy media. But Evanser is built to foster balanced discussions of controversial topics, welcoming to anyone on any side of any opinion. So, if you're interested in learning more about Evanser, or you're ready to give it a try, you can simply follow the link in the description or visit evanser.org to sign up. It's completely free and ready for you to join the conversation. So thanks again to Evanser for sponsoring today's episode, and now back to my conversation with Ashley. You spent a lot of time in your 20s in the Middle East, and
Yeah,
I guess
I'm much
Egypt
older
being
than I
one.
look. Yeah, I know. Whenever anybody guesses my age, I'm like, add 10 years at least, usually.
That's like a superpower.
Yeah, well, but the joke that I like to say, if you were like, how do you stay young looking? I'm like, I get vaccinated. I believe in science.
Yeah.
Those
things tend to help longevity.
Yeah, it does. It's just a joke. Obviously, it's like mostly genetics, thank God.
Sure.
But yeah, I first went to Egypt when I was like 20 or 21 or something, just to basically check it out because I wanted to study Arabic, and the Egyptian dialect of it is like, from what I understood at the time, the easiest and the one that everybody kind of understands.
Yeah, because they're the media moguls of the Middle East, I guess, right? They're producing most of the...
That too, right. So I was like, oh, okay, I think that's probably like the best accent and the best, because I think the other one was like MSA, like Modern Standard Arabic or something, and that's more like what you would read in the Quran or something. But I wanted more of like a conversational, like youthful kind of way of communicating, and I felt like the Egyptian version was probably the best. So I went there at first, and when I was 20, I went back. I went to a bunch of other Jesus, we went everywhere. We were like in Dubai, we went to Jordan, Israel, Turkey. We went to a bunch of places, and I kind of settled on like the American University in Cairo system to study Arabic. But then the Arab Spring happened, and they kicked us all out.
So you were there in 2011?
I was there. I was in Cairo.
Wow.
January 25th, I think 2011 was when we left. Yeah, or maybe I think maybe it started on the 25th and we left on the 27th, but we were basically told that there's really no way to get out of Cairo. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, except for the airport, which is pretty far away. And so they were like, yeah, the airport's shutting down in 8 hours. So you're trapped, basically, if you can't get out. So we were like, okay. So we like took a boat And we had to sail through Somalian pirate waters. You had to hire mercenaries because of all the pirates, and you could like only travel at night. You couldn't keep your phone on. You had to be really quiet. There was like a machine gun on the front of it. It was absolute madness. And then we got to Dubai.
Did you head out via the Red Sea if it was
Yeah.
Somalian water? Oh my God! And over to where?
Yeah. So we sailed around the Saudi Arabia peninsula. So the Persian Gulf basically was. Yeah.
And where did you get off?
Dubai.
Where was your first? Okay.
We got off in Dubai.
Wow, that's not a short sail.
No, we didn't really know where we were going or what was happening, because this is like, you could bring a smartphone with you traveling, but it was really expensive back then. So we didn't do that. We had our phones, but we would not turn them on because it was like $200 to turn your phone on. So we had no way of getting communication. We were just told, I mean, we could see it too. Like the protests were getting pretty, and nobody protests in like Middle Eastern culture, especially at that time, like nobody protested. So when that wave happened, it's not Italy, you know what I mean? Like in Italy, France, they all protest, right? Very unusual for there to be like 1 million people in Cairo just in the streets. But that was really, I'd never seen anything like that. I spent, at that point, a few months there. So we were just like, oh yeah, we'll get out. You don't need to tell us twice. Obviously something weird is happening here. And then we got to Dubai. We were there for a few days and we flew out to London. And it was when we were in London where there was a television playing, because I do remember being in Dubai and there was a newspaper they always leave newspapers like in the front of the door, and it was in Arabic, and my Arabic wasn't super great at the time, but I remember seeing something like seeing Mubarak's name and the word president and the word like protest and stuff, or like riot. I can't remember how I translated it, but I was like, oh, something heat is going on, but I didn't think anything of it. I was like, whatever, it'll be fine. And then I get to London and so cliche. We were eating fish and chips. We'd never been to London. So we were like, fish and chips. And we were in this like little shack and they had a big television and it was just like Cairo on fire. And I was with my roommate at the time and we were both just like watching the screen, like, holy shit, and we were like, oh my God, our parents must be freaking out. By that point, it'd been like a week, where we were just kind of bouncing around, trying to get out. And so there was a storm that came in. Our flight got delayed because it was like snowing or something in Boston or something like that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, of course, right? Because it was January, And oh no, by that point I think it might have been February. But we landed in Boston. We were like, "You ready to like turn your phone on?" As we turned our phone on, I was like, our parents freaking out, like, "Where are you? What's going on?" And we were like, "Oh shit!" Ever since then, I've always made sure I have my phone on, but. Back then it was really expensive. You need to get like a SIM card or something. It was like a whole thing. And we were like, we'll be fine.
It's also crazy how comfortable now. It almost sounds just too perilous to go without like a clear way to communicate with the outside world. It's crazy that I was like, I haven't talked to anyone I know for a week. And this is like a major geopolitical crisis and it's all good. No problem.
I know. Like we had our computers because like the whole point of me being there is I wanted to do the school, and the whole program, like it was very organized and, you just kind of always did what you were told and went where you went. So you didn't really have to worry about, organizing anything. But, when they were like, the airport shuts down in 8 hours, that was like a whole different, we're like, oh, okay, I guess we're leaving now. But yeah, it was pretty wild. I actually, a friend of mine was in like, I think he was in the same building taking a test that morning. And we met after the Arab Spring. And I don't know how it came up, but I told him like where we were. And he was like, you're right across the street from me. And we're like all taking tests. And we're just like oblivious to the chaos outside. It was just, but if you look like me, like, you couldn't stay.
Did you feel anything building up, or it really was just totally sudden?
I mean, Cairo is pretty crazy. Cairo is pretty loud, pretty chaotic anyway. But again, like I wore a hijab. I was learning Arabic. Like I was treated probably differently than I think a lot of blue-eyed demons would if they went there. I was clearly trying to at least understand the culture and not become a part of it, but just accept that I'm in a place that's not my normal, and I'm just going to do what you do. And I mean, the first time we crossed the street, a stranger came up and helped us. And that was, oh my God, that was my first interaction with, I think, an Egyptian. Was there's no crosswalk and there's like 8 lanes. And the cars are just buzzing all over the place. And we were just standing there like on the sidewalk, like, how does this even work? Didn't know a word of Arabic at the time. And this guy comes up and he's like, across the street? And we were like, yes. And he was like, follow me. And so he would move and then we would stay behind him and he would move and we'd stay behind. We're dodging cars, literally. And I mean, it was Frogger, and he was like, the trick is to close your eyes, pray to Allah, and go. So, and he brings us to the other side of the street, and he's like, okay, bye-bye, and he just walks away. We were like, this place is kind of cool. And that happened a lot. It was like people kind of taking pity on us because we looked but we were like clearly a part of something there. Like we weren't just like hanging out for a couple, well, the first time we were, but yeah, I mean, I really liked it. The whole thing was a bummer. I haven't been back since the Arab Spring, and it's been kind of sad, but it's like a different part of my life. But I mean, all of that is in the news so much now, especially with Palestine, and I've been there too. That was more recent. So it's just really, I don't know. I don't really like people forming opinions on stuff that they haven't seen, gone there and experienced it. And, you know, it's like a lot of people seem to have a lot of opinions and not know anybody from there or ever speak to them. And it's just really, it's like, do you not understand your own bias? It's really frustrating, but a lot of people try to get me to vocalize my opinion on all of that. And I've yet to do that. I will probably stay away from it. And you know what really pisses me off about that? Where the fuck were you for Yemen? That's the biggest humanitarian crisis on the planet right now. It's been going on for years a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Where the fuck have you been that whole time? You know, it's like, well, you want to talk about you and your self-righteousness on peace in the Middle East. And it's like, do you even know where Yemen is? Like, if I showed you on a map, do you even know where it is? That is the largest humanitarian crisis.
It's so, the Middle East, for how much attention and how much conversation goes around it, the extent to which people know literally nothing about it is wild.
They can't even like look at a map and tell me where stuff is. And I'm like, all right, I mean, it's really painful, you know, and you're totally entitled to your opinions, but you need to make sure that they got some backing, some research that you've done.
The basic foundation. I mean, the literal, like, as you said, Yemen is a country. It is over here. Like, just the very basic things would be great.
And they're just, you know, and I mean, I have a friend who had a relative and this friend of mine spent also quite a bit of time in the Middle East. And I don't think their relative knew about that and was just like, how can you not care about this? And my friend was like, what are you doing about it? Like, you live in a forest with a bunch of white people. You haven't done anything. You haven't raised any money. You know, it's like, you have a medical degree. You know what they need right now? Food and doctors and water and my electricity and like all sorts of things. Like, I don't see you I don't see you joining a Peace Corps. Like, you know, it's just, the self-righteousness is really insufferable. I'm willing to admit that I don't know everything that's going on over there. I don't understand all of the nuance. I try as best as I can. That's why I went in the first place. It was this part of the world that everybody, especially in my environment, hated. And I didn't really understand that. And I didn't get it. I had been indoctrinated into my own religious group and escaped it. So I was just curious, you know, what's going on. And that's literally why I went and why I kept going back. You know, it was like basically my research. I'm not saying everybody should jump on a plane, and I'm not saying that at all. That was just the method that I chose. But I can guarantee you that, especially if you live in a city, there's, oh my God, anywhere in the country, I'm like, there's going to be a Jew near you. There's going to be a Muslim near you. There's going to be a Palestinian near you. I mean, there's so many first-gen immigrants too. Like, there's plenty of people that you can talk to if you really cared and you really wanted to put in that effort. And it's really frustrating for me to just see this self-righteousness, like, this is the way it's supposed to work over there. And I'm like, well, it doesn't. You know, like,
yeah,
there's a lot
of sort of instantiating our own, because people just really underestimate also the extent to which that things work differently over there. I mean, the way people approach problems and their priorities and all these different things are so different that it's hard. Sometimes you hear, again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I mean, it's good that people are obviously, they want to get involved. They want to have an opinion. Yeah. But I don't think they realize that a half-baked, half-informed opinion is actually worse than just saying, I'm not sure, and not really engaging with it, at least until you do take the time to figure out what's going on. And it's also interesting, the amount of people I've talked to just in my personal life and also for this podcast who have, it always comes back to the Middle East. Everyone seems to have had
right now.
Yeah. But I mean, even the last 30 years, it's people have taken this pilgrimage in one way or the other. I mean, again, if it's in your case to sort of just a totally different understanding, a curiosity that develops, and so on. In my case, this is always a dicey topic because the association is not good. But my girlfriend is Israeli, and I ended up doing my master's degree at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Now, my
Damn.
background, yeah, my background is my mom's side of the family is Jewish, my dad's side of the family is Christian, I suppose. But I was
Whoa,
raised,
really?
I'm
Okay.
yeah, and I'm not religious. They're not religious. I'm just here. I'm like you. It's kind of like
Well,
I
you
the
guys,
whole all
you're like,
religions,
what?
yeah. But
It's
and
pretty
I'm not some diehard Zionist, and I'm also not so the other way either. And when you tell people that you are affiliated with Israel, it very quickly a lot of assumptions are made, and I understand
I've
that.
heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to. It's hard because my opinion of the situation being there, I was there for 4 years, including through COVID.
Damn.
And there was a yeah, so that was
Rough.
a whole thing of
Yeah.
it in itself, yeah. But the one thing that I learned, I went into it somewhat knowledgeable, started reading all these different books from every different perspective. I've been
Nice.
throughout Palestine, I've been throughout Israel, I have Israeli friends, I have Palestinian friends, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I'm sure of is that it's people like to say that it's very simple, there's a genocide, or it's very simple, this is we're defending ourselves, or whatever it is. The only assurance is that it is not simple. It is extremely difficult. There are bastards on both sides. There are wonderful people on both sides, and if it had a simple solution, it would be solved. So it always makes me cringe a little bit because I've seen I've reached out to people for the podcast. Again, I've had certain encounters in my personal life where the moment that association comes up, they shut down, but they're not aware that I'm actually interested in joining them in a lot of the things that they're fighting for. So
Right.
it's tough.
The thing I always say is that no matter where you go in the world, people just want to live their lives. They just want to have clean water, good food, family, and their kids have a chance at whatever future they want. Like everybody wants the same thing for themselves and their families. Literally does not matter where you go, for the most part, generalizing, but the overwhelming majority just, for the most part, just want to be left alone. Just let me do me and let me live my life. And I think when people can understand that almost all of us are the same, I think that was that for me as a 20-year-old growing up in super white, ultra white New England. Spending all this time in the Middle East was like, at first you think they're really, really different. Not just the way they look or the way they speak, but just, culturally, where are the crosswalks? Like, what the fuck is that? But like, but then you have conversations and you start really digging into it and you're like, oh my God, we're all the same. We're literally just all the same deep down. We all want the same stuff, really. We all want to do the same things. We all think pretty similarly. I feel like most people are pretty good at understanding both sides of a story, especially when it's clearly laid out for them or they've witnessed it themselves. And that's the thing that's missing right now, I think. That's the part is that you only want to listen to one side and then you just stick with it. And it's like, well, remember, we're all the same piece of shit human beings at the end of the day. We're just trying to survive. Like when you see that, it becomes so much easier to understand that it's the small percentage, it's the loudest people that somehow control the rodeo, and yet they have their own agenda. But for the most part, most people are just like, dude, I just want my kids to go to school, have clean water, just bare necessities here.
That is, I agree. But the one thing that scares me about that is then I consider how both physically traveling to really wherever in the world, as well as obviously social media. I mean, there's more exposure and accessibility to everyone else, which, I would have assumed is this humanizing thing that brings us all together
Too.
and
Yeah.
brings that idea to the front of everyone's mind. Yet we've kind of seen the opposite. So,
Because the algorithm doesn't work like that. That's
yeah,
why. The algorithm is hooked on who you know, where you are, and what they're watching. And you just get roped in. I mean, even my algorithm. So I have a few different TikTok pages specifically for this reason. And TikTok on one of them thinks that I'm a Middle Eastern man. And obviously my main one knows I'm like a white American. And then I have another one where I can tell the algorithm's not sure what I am because I've never done any videos where you can see or hear me on that one. So yeah, I basically have two secret accounts, and I use them as a platform to kind of gauge what the algorithm is doing. And I use a different phone too, and a VPN, and I do all of it to try to make sure that that the connections aren't being made. And the stuff that I see on my other accounts is pretty gnarly. Some of the stuff that pops up, and if I watch that video for just too long, I'll get another one like it. If I interact with it, it's even worse. So it's pretty easy to go down a rabbit hole and be trapped in an echo chamber. Thankfully the echo chamber that my main one is just like science stuff or like cooking or like random. It's so benign. There's like no heated stuff on that page. And so it's understandable that I would think like, oh, the internet is a mellow place where people are learning things. And then I have these other accounts that keep me in check that are like, no, it's a toxic hellhole. And I'm just like, oh God. So it's the algorithm. It's purposely doing that to because I mean the original intention was, oh well, what you like and what your friends like will be about the same thing. And if you live in, like for me, Los Angeles, you'll be interested in Los Angeles things like, oh, this Los Angeles donut shop that just opened up. Obviously that algorithm is going to focus on LA. So like the original intention made sense, but it has snowballed into this echo. I keep using the term, but it really is an echo chamber where you're just trapped into what you think and everybody else that you know thinks, and you forget anything else exists because it's not just TikTok. It's Instagram. It's, I mean, Facebook. Oh my God. I have not interacted with anything. So what I get on Facebook is literally the most, I can't even believe it's allowed on the internet. It's so atrocious. Facebook is ground zero.
I've heard one thing that's very weird is that I've heard many times, and the number always changes, the details always change, but I've heard it's like, well over 50%, 60, 70% is typically what I hear of the accounts across all of the platform are bots. And I wonder how much, first of all, I would definitely, for anyone listening, don't go around telling your friends until you fact check that one, but there's a significant degree of truth for sure. And I would be curious the distribution across social media platforms. I mean, I don't want to give Facebook a get out of jail free card by saying, oh, it's just bots. But I mean, first of all, if that's true, fix your bot problem. But even if it's not, like, it would be interesting to see where, because I think most governments, or at least major governments, are involved in this. I think there's a lot of private people that are involved in this. I've seen a bunch of different theories. Yeah. Well, this is not certainly not my area of expertise, and I despise conspiracy theories with a passion. I mean, obviously
99% of them.
Yeah,
there's usually there's usually one good one in there every now and then. Where you're like, ooh.
No, exactly. You have to at least keep your mind open enough to catch the occasional one. But for the most part, I find that it's typically just bullshit. But in this case, I think it's.
I believe it. I would believe it. I think the worst would probably be Facebook. Would probably have the most bots, but I would not be surprised. But man, how do you even find that out though? Who would even have that information?
I don't know that. I mean, anything. No? Every time I talk to friends with computer science, cybersecurity backgrounds, they make it sound like, oh yeah, we could figure that out. It's just a matter of throwing enough people, enough time, enough tools. But as far as I understand, we can. That is something we know a good amount about and could learn more about. But because I mean, these platforms are challenging. I think they are to different extents, but it's definitely not something on top of their priority list, as far as I understand.
It's probably out of control. I would imagine that they've lost the reins on that one. If that's true, and I would believe it too, because I mean, I'm not a bot, but I don't know. I don't know enough about that actually. That's really, I'm gonna be looking that up. There's got to be a way. That must be so overwhelming.
Oh yeah. And it's also just, I mean, you'd think they'd be more motivated by it even just from a data storage consideration, because I mean, that's just, they're taking up a lot of space, and that's, one of the biggest
Amazon
expenses.
All this money for their servers.
Exactly. So I wonder, I don't know, again, like anything digital, computer science, so on, is just, if it's not in the physical sciences, I feel like a dumbass. I have no ability to interface with it.
It's brutal. Yeah, when you study mathematics, they make you learn all that stuff, and it's just like, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, modern and perfect for bringing that up, because I do want to get in. I have a bunch of questions just about your exact background, but it is funny.
Sorry, we went off
No,
keep them in.
that's good. That's exactly what I hope for, actually. But I do want to make sure that anybody who comes and wants to hear about you and your background and they hear
Oh,
nothing related to math.
I know. It's like talking like studying Arabic. It's like, look, I've
Yeah,
had a
yeah,
lot of
exactly.
lives. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
just this is just the
My
most recent one. Okay, yeah.
no, my roommate and many of my good friends are math majors, and
Oh,
they're
really?
all yeah, and they're all programmers now. I mean, that's where they
Yeah.
started with math. They are computer scientists,
Okay.
data scientists, so on.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that's
sense.
kind of where it is now. So what again? I know from watching your appearance on the Rebellious podcast, lifelong math enjoyer turned
Yeah.
accountant, turned
No.
frustrated accountant, turned
Yeah.
mathematician.
Yeah.
So what exactly, I mean, I know what brought you back broadly speaking, but how did you get into math specifically rather than physics, chemistry, so on? And then you went to grad school? Was that the PhD or the master's?
Yeah, that was just the master's, and that was during COVID. And that was like, it's so interesting how all of this happened because it was not at all what I expected. So, I had worked as a demo singer. So for that's when I moved to LA. That's
Another
what I wanted
life.
to do. Yeah, I know, another freaking life. That one actually does make sense. I'm a classically trained violinist, pianist. The term classically trained, by the way, is its own thing that has snowballed into this horror show. But basically, it just means that I played a lot of old music for a long time. And then I transitioned into being a vocalist. And so I had training in that for years. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And demo singing is so much easier to get into than being like a rock star because you're basically a studio singer. You know, a guitarist or a drummer, they'll write a song and they want to sell it, but they don't know how to sing or it's not in their range. And so they'd hire me to perform the song so they can be like, here's what it sounds like. And the artist can decide if they want to buy it or not. And then they record it themselves. Loved that gig. That was super fun because I got to do different music all of the time. And it was very networky. You had to know people. It wasn't like I was on payroll or anything. So the money was super inconsistent, which made it kind of sketch to me. But what was weird is one of the producers I used to work with a lot was like, oh, you should come to this. It was like somebody's birthday. And we were downtown LA. And I was like, ugh, God, partying with musicians is like you're gonna need an IV in the morning, which they have here. People do that. They go, yeah, which is just I was like, no.
Crazy new
And
trend, yeah.
yeah, it's LA is a whole friggin' thing. And so my producer friend was like, no, I think you'll like these guys because they all work at SpaceX. And I was like, oh, how are you friends with them? And he was like, my girlfriend was friends with the director's girlfriend, or I don't know, but he somehow got into this circle. And so I go to this like party or whatever, this event downtown, and I got along so much better with everybody there than I ever did with anyone else in LA. Musicians, other singers, producers. It was like, oh, these nerds are so much more my speed. And it was so much easier for me to talk to them. And then I just started getting invited to more and more events. And I remember I was at some bougie whiskey bar or something. And I was with one of the like head honchos at one of Elon Musk's companies because a lot of them bounce around. At least back in the day, I don't know about now, but like 8 years ago or whatever, they would bounce around between his companies. And these three guys like walked into this like really intimate whiskey bar and they recognized him and we all just started talking. And one of the guys thought that I was like a head honcho at SpaceX just because of the way that I talk and the way that I carry myself. I'm pretty cocky when I talk. I'm not trying to like I'm better than you. I don't. It's not that kind of cockiness. It's just like I'm very confident. I think when I talk, but it's such a New England thing. It's not even.
Sure. I get what you're saying, but
right. It's like I could be a scared little bitch, and I'm still going to talk like that. And when he thought that, and he was so convinced, and he was like one of the head cybersecurity guys at like Bank of America or something bonkers like that. And he was like, and he was like, what do you do for work? And I told him, he's like, you need to get out of that. He's like, that's not where you should be. And he said it, I don't know, there was something about the way he said it where I just knew he was right. And I literally enrolled to get a math degree, I think like the next opening semester that I could. Yeah. And I did that for a bit. And that was just to get a bachelor's. Luckily, I had a lot of crossover classes, so it didn't take me too long. And I could do it like at night and stuff. But then I got into grad school here in LA and COVID happened. It was August 2020. And they were like, oh yeah, we're going to be remote. And it's like, okay, well, I wanted to write a thesis, and writing a thesis in your pajamas for 2 years is just, you can't do that. Like you need you need resources, you need access to the professors, like there's so much involved with that. And I was like, is it just the fall semester? Because that I can handle. I'll power through and cram a whole thesis into 3 semesters if I have to, you know. And then we got an alert that the spring semester would also be remote, and it looked like we're just gonna be remote. Like half of my time in grad school is gonna be remote, and you pay a lot of money, you know. To get a PhD is really expensive. Even if you luck out and get scholarships, you're still gonna pay a lot of money. And I was like, I don't have the money for this, you know, like, and I'm not gonna risk failing a class and having to redo it because then you got to pay more. And it was just so much risk. And I was like, what can I do? And they were like, look, a lot of kids, because of this whole COVID thing, they're like, you can hold your enrollment when COVID blows over and we're back in the classroom. You don't have to reapply or anything. You can just come back and we'll insert you back in. I was like, perfect. Yeah, let's do that. And so, you know, the fall semester, spring semester goes by. It's the summer. And so at that point, it's, the summer of 2021. I think we had it flared up again, COVID. So it was like, oh, the fall semester too. And I was really bored. I really wanted to work on this thesis, and it had been a year, right? And I was like, I'm just going to post a video about it online and on TikTok, and maybe there'll be like 50 people who know what I'm talking about. And maybe I can like kind of bounce ideas off of them. Because that's part of writing a thesis too, is like having a soundboard and kind of tell me if I'm crazy, just, you know, kind of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, let's just see if there's 50 people who even understand this. And that video went viral. I was like, what the fuck? I was like, all right, well, that's a fluke. There's no way. And then I made another one and another one. And then it became like within a year or two, it became like a full-time job. And then the school opened back up and they were like, all right, we're back in the classroom. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to have this kind of access or make this kind of money ever again. There's no way. Like I expected to spend my whole life in an office space on a computer doing research for the rest of my life. I did not expect to be in the front of any camera ever. But what's that expression? Luck is opportunity meets preparation. I love that. And that's what situation I was in, where it's like, this isn't really what I wanted to do, but you know, anything in entertainment doesn't last, right? If you leave for 6 months, you might as well have died. So I was like, well, I can always go back to school, but I can't always do this. So, yeah, a lot of people think I have a PhD, and I was like, that was what was supposed to happen, but COVID and this blew up, and I'm just going to ride this train for as long as I can. And if it goes to shit, then I go back to school, and it's not a big deal. I might do something else. So it's like, you know,
yeah,
but yeah, that's that's my story.
That, I mean, again, it's another commonality between a lot of the people I've talked to. For example, I'm not sure, maybe you've heard of Plasma Channel before.
That does sound familiar.
Yeah, he had the same experience where I think he moved to Austin to be an actor, and he had sort of a broad background.
What?
I actually think it has a burgeoning film industry, as far as I understand. That was my exact response, but apparently that's a thing.
Maybe like when I feel
maybe he was. I don't want to butcher his story. I think he maybe went to LA or somewhere a little more traditionally sensible first. No, you're right. No, you're.
Or Los Angeles, like only this city. Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay. No, I mean you are right as well, and that was my reaction. Is sort of like, Austin? Is that the correct city? But yeah. So yeah, I think eventually.
Yeah, it's like theater at Minnesota. It's like, what do you? Yeah, no, you go to New York for that. Like,
yeah, whatever. No, it's true. But I mean, one of the good parts, I guess, about society being turned upside down is the meta is changing. So I feel like we are going to see a lot more like, oh, you want to build airplanes? That's Iowa. You got to go to Iowa now. You know, like things are moving around. But point is, he did combine the performative aspect of his life and his career and his interest in science and technology. And I think that's to his huge benefit, and clearly yours. I mean, it's obviously no coincidence. I think a huge part of your success probably is the confidence and the comfort in front of the camera and the performance and the voice projection and all of these things.
Yeah, that's a big, and that takes a lot of practice and experience to know how to perform and not get nervous. That's its own problem that everybody has to deal with. Even if you're cocky, there's always some little hint in the back of your mind that's like,
sure,
it's kind of terrifying, you know. But yeah, I think.
Do you struggle with imposter syndrome in the context of your videos?
Oh my god. So when I struggle hardcore, and everybody in my personal circle calls me out for it. I never show anybody outside of it what it looks like, because that ruins the whole. But the people closest to me are just like, you need to get over that. But there's 2 other women that I talk to who do this, and they both have really successful accounts. I think they're both verified accounts on TikTok. I don't want to say who they are, but like, if I told you where they worked or even who they were, like, you would know. You'd know these places, right? And like on the NASA kind of level, you know what I mean?
I think I have
And
a few in mind.
yeah, and you're like, you kind of don't want to say it because like I don't. But anyway,
Yeah,
the 3 of
yeah.
us talk every now and then, and it blows my mind because they both have PhDs from like major universities, right? And their imposter syndrome, I'm like, Jesus, I have nothing compared to that, to you. And but they deal with a lot. One of them, especially because I think of where she is too, she deals with a lot of sexism, a lot of it. And the 3 of us always are basically talking about how we have to shed the imposter syndrome, because it makes it harder for other women to step up into those roles if the people they're looking up to are like scared cats all the time. Like, you can't behave like that, because then they'll feel like there's something to be afraid of, and that's not necessarily true. I'm older than both of them, though. That's the thing. I went to school back in the early 2000s. That was when I first went to college, and I was the only girl in my computer class, and the environment was so hostile and toxic. But the guys treated each other like shit too. It wasn't like all targeting me or anything. It was just a terrible environment. And I was like, get me out of here. And that's why I ended up going into accounting instead, because the engineering school, and that means, well, at UNH, we basically call it SEPs. It was just an engineering school, but that was where you went for anything STEM, basically. And it was so terribly toxic. I mean, I thought where I came from had been a pretty toxic place, but that was otherworldly. And I was like, I'm not doing 4 years of this shit. But now it's a lot better. Like when I went to grad school, it was, you have Black, brown, Asian, men, women, trans. It's like, you have everything, and you're like, oh, this is like an actual chunk of society. This is like an actual representation of the human species, instead of just like all white men. You know what I mean? So it's a lot better now. And I think it's really funny when the 2 of them are just like, it's so toxic. I'm like, it is, but damn, I don't know if you would have survived it 20 years ago. It was like really terrible. But I try not to say anything. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, it is still bad, but it's not, there's been a lot of improvement. So I'm pretty hopeful about that. So it's like, I really have to shed the imposter syndrome, because it's, it sets such a bad visual and it's not just like for other women, but like for anybody, anyone outside of again, like I'm from New England. So of course it was like all white men in these fields, but anyone who's not that, to try to make them feel like, yeah, you could be here too. It doesn't really matter. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. And do you feel the same sort of energy is carried over to the science communication side? Do you find a lot of the same negative energy and attention and so on in the comment sections, for example?
It's actually, yeah, it's about the same. The reason I go by Ashley Christine is because I had changed my name because of a stalker from that whole thing.
Really?
So
wow.
Yeah. Stupidly, I had gone by the first initial of my last name for a while there. Just not even my last name, just the first initial. And somebody found me and took a picture of like my apartment, sent it to me. It's pretty fucked up. So I had to like change my name. And once I did that, no one could find me anymore. So I'm sure it's only a matter of time, but at least I bought myself this window. But online, it's very rapey. It's very, I get some racist shit every now and then, which is, yeah, that I didn't expect.
I can't even imagine what you mean. Like,
yeah, I don't want to say who's delivering it, but it's a very specific demographic that delivers it.
Okay.
At least if their profile pictures are accurate. So
that's weird, though. That's very weird.
I didn't expect that one, but that used to happen a lot. But I started blocking these accounts, and so the algorithm kind of kept it away from them, because if their friends aren't seeing it, then their friends aren't seeing it, then their friends. So now it's like much better off. And I have enough followers now where they'll defend me, so I don't have to do anything. Yeah, it is pretty cool. It's like, oh, thanks, guys. I'm sure you don't know that I'm reading these, but I actually am every now and then. And it's like, oh, thanks. But yeah, the stuff that I used to get last year, it's calmed down, but last year I almost quit this whole game because of how bad it had gotten. Yeah, so no, a year and a half ago, I would say, probably, but I almost quit because it was just like somebody sent me a picture of my apartment. I mean, and here's the thing, right? The algorithm is location based. The majority of my followers are going to be in Los Angeles, and that was around the time when my account was really blowing up. And I remember getting a coffee, and the guy was like, "Are you that science chick on TikTok?" And I was like, "I don't like this." And so I knew that the statistical likelihood of me walking outside my door and one of these thousands of men who are threatening me, maybe one will take it seriously and could be within 3 miles of my apartment. And they know what I look like and what I sound like, what my name is, and I have no idea who they are. So there was like a real terrifying element to that there was a statistical likelihood that one of these psychopaths is near me. And it's really not that different from any other day being a woman, but this is like targeted, so it's a little different, and I don't know who it is. But it has gotten a lot better. Also, I'm from New England, so like there's a part of me that's always like, please try.
Yeah, like, give it a go. Yeah.
Give it a go, because I am bored. No, I'm just kidding. but like, not that
I'd
like,
appreciate the challenge.
Yeah, not that I'm welcoming it, but I mean, I don't know. I generally like one of my friends and I, we had somebody pulled a gun on us like 6 months ago in LA,
In the context based on knowing you,
oh
or
my
just
God.
purely?
No, we were
Okay.
in a
I was
car.
like, holy shit.
Yeah, I've been here
Not
for
that
10
it's better
years.
that they didn't know you, but I mean, I guess it's
This
a
guy
little
for
better,
sure.
maybe.
No,
Okay.
because I feel like I had a hat on and sunglasses. We were in a car. There was really like no way of knowing, but I know 10 years of living in LA, and this is the first time it's happened in this city. Yeah, we were in the car and it was traffic. It was Santa Monica Boulevard, and it's like creeping along. And there was a plaza with an exit, and I guess a car was trying to like get into the row of traffic, and my friend just like didn't see him trying to get in, and was like, oh shit, sorry, like was basically T-bone blocking him kind of thing. And the guy just starts yelling at us, and we were like, well, the thing is, he started yelling in Spanish. I didn't know what he's saying, but my friend was Puerto Rican and was yelling in Spanish back at him. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but judging by the tone, this is getting heated. And I'm in the middle, right? And the guy pulls a gun out of his like dashboard and starts waving it around. And my friend, who's like 15-year Middle East Army, like some real heinous shit. Like, that is not a guy you can ruffle his feathers. So we were both sitting in the car, and we both looked at him, and the windows rolled down, and I'm just like, seriously, dude? And the guy just like kind of stares at us, and he yells, but without the oomph, and eventually puts the gun away. And I was just like, what the fuck was that? But yeah, so it's a wild ride over here.
Yeah, LA's some stuff for sure. For sure. Being from Arizona, I've spent a lot of that's where we go, when we want to leave the state.
Or
anything. Yeah, 4th of July, even a lot of people go for Christmas just so it's a little
time.
Cooler. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
no one's here. It's great.
Yeah, but were you able to pursue that? I'm just curious. Like, did you report that to the police or anything, or just said, fuck it, he's just probably a nutter?
He wasn't going to do it. Because here's the thing. Without saying too much, I guess, I did spend a lot of time in the Middle East, and I've seen some shit. And there's a look that generally men, in my experience, have. And the phrase that I was told by one of my Army Ranger friends is, no one is home. You look in their eyes, and it's just like, no one is home. Like, they're gone. Like, it's almost like you have to become something else in order to do a heinous act. And because a lot of people think there'll be rage, and like sometimes there's crimes of passion, but in those contexts, no one is home, right? And so he didn't have that look. He just didn't. And I've seen it before, and I didn't see it in him, and there wasn't enough rage. So it was one of those, like, your mind subconsciously assesses a situation and goes, nope, you're good. He's not going to do it. So we were both just like, whatever, dude. But
anyway,
yeah, like, we're not going to press it because I'm like, he wasn't. I bet that gun's not even loaded, to be honest. So
or real, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, it could be a water gun that he painted. I mean, who knows, right? So we were just like, meh, whatever. Yeah. Plus, what I don't know if this is true for everybody, but from my military friends that I do know, they generally avoid trying to report anything unless they sense a legitimate threat or danger. And to somebody like my friend, that was not a threatening situation, which is insane, but in his mind,
shows
it was
you
like,
what he was exposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. In his mind, he was like, oh, that wasn't anything. He wasn't going to do it. So who cares? And you're like, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Are we still getting quesadillas?
Yeah, exactly. Like just going back, snapping back into the ordinary conversation.
Like, yeah, we're still getting quesadillas, right? Like, oh god, that was actually
did any of this play a role in choosing Eratosthenes for the channel name, or like did you start with your real name
I
and then
did.
change to the okay?
Yeah. Well, it was under my singing the name, but I did have, I think, Ashley M on there or something like that. But well, whatever. Ashley M was up at some point back in the day. But yeah, I didn't know the page was going to blow up. If I knew that, I wouldn't have chosen such a rough word for English speakers. You know what I mean? Like, I love how you pronounced it correctly. I love that. Didn't think about it. I just, it's my favorite historical figure. He was a mathematician, a musician. He discovered the curve of the earth with sticks. I mean, it's so cool, so brilliant.
Geographer.
Yeah, he was in charge of the Library of Alexandria, I think, for a time or something like that. And I mean, it was just a philosopher, jack of all trades, master of none. Though that was he was the beta of all things.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah, before Shakespeare took that expression, Eratosthenes was always known as. I don't know that their actual expression for it. It was basically like master of none kind of thing. And I really felt that. I was like, I like all this stuff, so I'm going to do STEM as a general topic instead of mathematician. But man, if I knew that, I would have not done Eratosthenes. Every time people try to spell that word, they're like, sorry, I should have chosen an English word.
No, choosing the name for any, like even the Wiser Tomorrow podcast, that it's easy to say, but just
a great name.
It triggers my imposter syndrome so aggressively because it's so presumptuous. It's so, again, I like it, but I sat there and I spent months just kind of thinking about it and wasting time, not just actually making content and trying to do the things I want to do because I couldn't feel good about the name. But I don't know. It goes back to everything you're saying. I mean, again, Wiser Tomorrow implies that I am equipped. Listen to me in the conversations that I'm having with others, and you will become wiser. You know, it's something I don't like about it.
It depends on the language too, because in English, when you say wiser tomorrow, there's no indication of the pronoun of who's saying it, or the subject. So it depends on the language, but it could be translated as we are going to be wiser tomorrow, like together, rather than as a command, like you are going to be, you know what I mean? In English, we don't really have that. So you can think of it like that. Like,
I appreciate that.
Do it together. You know what I mean? That's how I would try to justify it to make myself feel better.
Do you think it's an inhibiting factor that it is difficult to pronounce and search and so on? Because I mean, again, the numbers seem to not mind. It seems like everything's going pretty well. So not too much of a barrier.
I mean, I'm sure it's so unique that if you do know anything about me, that name, you immediately know who it's referencing because the word is so bizarre to an English speaker, you know? But I do. And the other problem that I made was ModernDay. I made it one word when it's technically two, but I didn't want to have all these like underscore, like I thought it looked ugly. And so that was kind of the other mistake that I made because it makes me look like a dipshit. I'm like, yeah, ModernDay, one word. And then, you know, this Greek name that I probably can't pronounce correctly either. You know, it was just like, oh man, I might have made the wrong move there, but I can't change it now. Now it's definitely too late. So that's just life now.
Sure. And are you like, just so maybe it's interesting from your perspective, I'm a big YouTube guy, so I came across you on Shorts, but I guess TikTok is your bread and butter. Am I mistaken with that? That's number one, sort of?
TikTok is definitely my main platform. Yeah, I didn't want to do YouTube because the production value was just something I didn't want to deal with. I don't know much about camera work. I do not care. I'm more about just what are we talking about? And then when TikTok started having problems during the Trump era, when he was threatening of getting rid of it, I was like, oh, I have to have more platforms. I can't just rely on one. So I just took the videos I was making on TikTok and trimmed them down to the minute limit that's on YouTube Shorts. And I got 70,000 followers from that. So that was convenient because it's no extra work. But now I'm trying to actually make like longer form YouTube videos. I just hired an assistant to help me with that because I literally do not have the bandwidth or the time to do scripts for all of these platforms. So he does the research and then I put it into a script now for longer form. But that's going to take a long time. YouTube, especially since I have kind of like a slacker setup. I use my iPhone, right? Like I don't have.
iPhone's
I have
pretty
a
good
real,
though.
thanks. I mean, yeah, it's the HD settings. I have a real mic. When it comes to audio, I got that down, obviously. But the visuals, yeah. Like I know it's not super great, but I'm not paying for an editor right now, so. And 70,000 is
It's
not
all
bad for not having done anything.
No, it's pretty damn good. And also, like, I mean, obviously production value is great and whatever, but
Would be
when I go to
nice.
YouTube, I'm not expecting the same thing as if I turned on the TV. Like I find it sort of cozy. I mean, it's the point. I want like a content creator, an
Yeah,
individual person who's taken the tools at their disposal and made something cool. Like I find
true.
it to be a charming thing, not like I actually think people make the mistake of getting way too down the rabbit hole of like my lighting is perfect, the camera's perfect, I chose the best lens, the best camera. It's
Yeah,
just stupid. Just make the stuff.
that's what I'm trying to do. But it's funny. The algorithm does remind me a lot of TikTok. So on Instagram, I have 270,000 followers, I think. Every time I post something, the viewership will be around like 100,000, which makes sense, right? Because it's like that's how many followers you have. It's not everybody's on their phone every day. Some people don't even remember they're following you. 100K seems about correct for views. TikTok though, you got to fight for your life on every video. Just because you have X amount of followers does not mean that's at all the same amount of people that are going to see it.
Interesting.
I have put up videos where 0.001% see it, which is insane. It's like, why even have followers at that point? Because they don't even know about it. But I thought that was unique to TikTok, but YouTube is like that too, actually. I've noticed anyway. So 70,000 followers, and for the long form videos, struggles to even get 5 or 6,000. So I'm like, oh, I got to play the TikTok game, which I don't really like. That was like the whole point of getting into long form was so that I don't have to like snare people in the first 5 seconds. Not even first 2 or 3 seconds, because you
Yeah.
always have to say something slightly inflammatory, which it's like, it's the
I know.
hustle. I got into a lot of trouble because of that recently, which I haven't even, this will be the first time I'm mentioning it, but I made a video on, I was basically shit talking a bunch of YouTube accounts that were like, we found this planet 7 trillion, I can't remember now, 7 trillion miles away that has city lights. And I was like, holy shit. So I tore it to shreds. But what happened was people who stitched it only stitched the first 5 seconds. And when I say like, here's what happened, everybody's talking about this, and like, here's what actually happened. That's the section that they took. Right. And so it got like 23 million views or something like that, which was, that's not the video I want that to be hitting. And USA Today got a hold of people who were stitching it, and they shit talked me in this article. It was like, this is basically why we can't have nice things. It was like, they're not doing their research, and it's spreading like wildfire, and it's just inflammatory for the sake of getting views. So I emailed them. I emailed the writer, and I was like, and I was as cordial as can be, because I of course inside I was like, I'm gonna rip your fucking face off. But
Yeah.
when you, it's the New Englander in me, I think. But when you actually write this stuff, you have to be like, so that video was taken out of context. You're talking about people who's stitching it, not the original source material. Did you watch the original source material? If not, here's the script, here's the video. And to their credit, within 2 hours, not only was the original article taken down and rewritten, correcting all of that, but the head editor personally apologized to me. So
That's
credit where credit is due. Yeah. So I
I
was
don't know
like,
how to feel
okay.
about that. On the one hand, I mean, just not realizing from the outset that that wasn't the source material is like a pretty
Yeah.
egregious error.
And
But
it was
it's
the fact
also,
checkers section of the page.
oh wow. So yeah,
Mhm.
somebody literally just didn't do their job, I think. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
as simple as that.
Literally.
But
Yeah.
that's good. That's definitely good. I don't know whether to feel mostly positive or mostly negative from
I
that,
know.
because again, like,
Which is why I didn't say anything.
weird.
I was like,
Yeah,
all right, whatever. But to their
fair
credit,
enough.
I mean, and it was like a Friday afternoon too, and I think they're on the East Coast time, so they would have gotten that email at what 4:30 their time, and yet still handled it. Didn't let the weekend go by. So I was like, damn, okay. And yeah, and my email was pretty cordial, and I was like, if that happens again next time, just ask me, like reach out or something. And to be fair, I looked through everything, and the writer had sent me a message through Facebook chat messenger or whatever, which you got to send it. Yeah, like you got to be a bit more formal if you're trying to get, like, how many of those I get where people ask me stupid ass questions. See, I got a bunch of those messages too, being like, is this real? Like, I was just like, I'm not going to respond to 100 people being like, asking me what I already answered. And she was one of them. So I'm like, yeah, I just kind of got lost in you got to email me, and like, or there's other avenues you can take, it's just,
it's
hey,
still
whatever.
cool. I mean, I got to imagine from your perspective, like the idea of being on something like USA Today is pretty cool. I mean, obviously it's unfortunate that it wasn't. Check out this great video that clarified this misconception.
I
But
know.
it's still cool to like start seeing that level of publication and like media attention and recognition. Or is it a little anxiety inducing?
Yeah, I mean, like the whole point of why I'm still sticking with this, because it's pretty toxic, because I have to deal with stuff like that, which again, like it all resolved in the end, but I was prepared to take them to court for sure, because that's my name, my image. You
It's
didn't do
defamation
anything.
for the whole business. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just lying. Like, oh no, I'm gonna, I was ready to go, but I was like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and see if they handle this first. And they did. So everything was fine. But I was never gonna find out about that article. I only found out because one of my friends who used to work at NASA let me know. She saw it and was like, she ripped them a new asshole, but they ignored her because it's not about her, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so, and it took 3 days. I didn't notice it for like, by the time I addressed it, it'd been like a week. So I'm like, great. So this shit's been up for like a week. So no, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I like it. Like my dream for all this, the reason why I stick with all of this is because the thing that I want to do is kind of behind the camera kind of work. I don't know, but it's really rich coming from me because I have a couple of projects coming up where I'm like in front of a camera hardcore. So it sounds a bit hypocritical, but I don't know how I feel about it. I'm still kind of getting used to it, to be honest. It's like,
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a necessary evil in a certain sense, just because you probably can make the biggest impact by just, again, you do the most yourself, get in front of the camera, say it how you think it needs to be said. But
yeah.
so ideally, do you have a long-term vision for all of this? Like in a world where there's no reason to stop, where would you love to see it by the end of the road?
I mean, I have like 3 major goals that I would be psyched about, but the first one is what I wanted to do. And I've reached out to a couple of people that I want to work with on it, but I want to have a show where there's 4 of us who all have different areas of expertise. And we go out, because I keep an eye on this stuff too. The low key inventors of the world, the researchers working on projects that just sound batshit insane. I want to go to all of these people and really dig into what they're working on. And these would be inventions and research that, if it's true, if it works, would completely save humanity in a lot of ways. I mean, inventions that are so far stretched, but maybe they might work. And I think people like watching hopeful, optimistic stuff like that. People who aren't thinking 5 years ahead, they're thinking 100 years ahead. And it's kind of like the Star Trek effect, where I think a lot of people like Star Trek because it gives you a feeling of hope that we're going to make it. And it might be a few hundred years until things turn amicable and somewhat peaceful, but like there's a chance. And I think people like knowing that there are inventors, designers, researchers working on a future, planting a seed for a tree of the shade they'll never sit under. I do think people like that. And those are the people that I want to find and talk about what they're working on. And this wouldn't be people who are starting from ground zero, they're working in their garage. They have maybe one angel investor or something, but they need money and they need resources and they need a platform, because funding in the scientific community is a freaking nightmare. It's not just science, it's actually the entire STEM world. Really, really tough. And nobody invests in anything that the public doesn't care about. That's why NASA has struggled for so many decades, because people just don't give a shit about space or whatever. So you got to get the public excited. If the public is excited, they can get funding. If they get funding, they can do the research, and you might be able to save humanity, planning 100 years out. I want people to know that people are working on these problems. They really are. I did one on warp drives. There are actually labs that are working on trying to figure out how would a warp drive actually function. We're not going to be seeing one. right? That is like our children's children's children maybe catching a glimpse of it, right? Um, and that's the ultimate goal, to have that. But eventually I would sell the show or hand it over to somebody else, and then I would work in the background facilitating the money with the inventors, because that's really what it comes down to. So being a facilitator is more of like my dream goal. So I need to have a little bit of public recognition, but not so much as it ruins my life, like I can't go outside or something like that. So that's the first major goal, is to get that show up and going. That would be that'd be so fun. That would be so great. And I have
Is
like
that
a whole
related
list.
to any of the things your work you just alluded to before in terms of the
Oh
new?
yeah, I've made videos on half of them, and just to test the waters to see how much people care about it, and they care a lot. They care a lot. So I'm like, this would work. This show would work, because this is a 90-second run through of this thing, and it's got millions of views. This will work. It's just a matter of designing it, and I need experience, and it's a lot of work, because that would be like a legit show, not like a YouTube thing. I mean, like a, you know, not on the scale of Cosmos, but I mean, that would be
Yeah, I
nice.
get what you're saying though.
Yeah, but
Do
kind
you
of
do
like a
you
Try
find that?
Guys.
Yeah, yeah. Would it be short form still, or are you talking about still like full
No,
length?
that would be full length. Yeah,
Full length.
at
Got it.
least an hour for each thing, because we would dive into how the thing works. So it would be me, mathematician, although I'm probably going to be more of like the social aspect of it. There's an astrophysicist who I talk to, AI ethics specialist, and then a philosopher. And so you get all these different facets of humanity talking about this one invention and how it might impact us, how it works, because that's really important. How does this thing work? That's my biggest beef with these shows. They'll be like, the tone is very childlike. Like, I hate that shit. Talk to me like an adult. Just explain to me, because that's why adults don't ask stupid questions, right? How do ships float? You ask that question and people just are like, like, because oh yeah, I should know that. I should know that. I've been on a boat, and it makes people cave up. And then when you go to watch a video, I'm like, how do ships float? It's targeted for 8-year-olds. And it's like a cartoon, like, oh, we're gonna go climb up. And it's just, oh my God, I can't stand that tone. Drives me crazy. I don't like Hammy. I'm more of like, yeah, how does this shit work? Just tell me how it works, down to the atomic level, because people's brains go down to really small levels. And yeah, I want to explain how it actually works. Like, one of the things I don't think I would do, because they have a lot of funding and they're doing pretty well, but spin launch somewhere in California, I think, where it's basically a vacuum. It's this huge circular, I don't dome, I guess, but it's a vacuum too, and it's massive. I forget how tall it is, but I think it's like Statue of Liberty-esque kind of height. And they basically slingshot a very small package, I guess, that can get into space. It is like a rocket, because it does have to turn on for a hot second, like just to reach past the upper atmosphere. But most of it is just slingshotting in, so you're not burning all this fuel. You can carry light packages. Can't put a person in it; they'll die from the G forces. But it's good for getting like supplies up to a space station, or whatever. But the thing with that, every episode that I've watched on that, they're just like, yeah, you sling it and it goes through a vacuum. It's like, what I would do is explain why a vacuum works the way it does. We would get into the nitty gritty of why this is actually a really good idea and the science behind it, rather than just like, we use momentum. That's a nice word, but most people don't actually really understand what momentum is. Not really, you know what I mean? It's like, we are going to clarify all of that. So there's no assumptions on any words we all think we're using every day. Like acceleration, damn, there's a word everybody thinks they know, but is actually super complicated, And it's like, I would really get down into the nitty gritty of that. So that's my whole spiel on that story.
I think no, I appreciate that, because one of the for me in my experience and just being a big consumer of science communication content in general, like the gripe I also have, even if the tone is right, even if it's not the sort of ridiculous hunky dory kind of, yeah, exactly. Even if the tone is good, it's tough to hit that level, the correct level of depth, because obviously like you're trying to distill complicated information to be digestible, but at the same time, even if you do that in, what I guess would traditionally be considered a good job, I do feel like there should be more of a pressure for people. The expectation should be higher, because even some of the somewhat complicated explanations, like they're lacking. And I'll go so far as to extend this to education and stuff as well. Did you take chemistry courses in university as well as a part
Oh
of
yeah,
either of your?
yeah, they were
So I don't,
mandatory.
if you remember, they tell you, I think in Gen Chem 1 or
Don't you
even in
say
high school
organic
level.
chemistry.
No, I'm actually not. Surprisingly, no. The one
Okay.
example that always comes to mind is they tell you in Gen Chem the basics about like atomic and molecular orbitals. They'll say SP, D, and
Yeah.
F, circle, dumbbell, double dumbbell,
God, I hate
barium.
chemistry. But
And
yeah.
that's on my list of topics to get to. Is
Oh
you made that
no,
exact comment.
my least
But we'll
favorite.
save that. We'll save
Oh
that.
God.
But
Okay.
what drives me fucking crazy is that they do things even in like a university environment where they say, the orbital, it's called S, it's a sphere, and bonding, and then they stop. And it's sort of like that's actually, and you've just polluted the person's mind with this half-baked understanding that's now going to confuse them every time it comes up in any context. And I feel the same sort of way where, again, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Here's somebody trying to communicate an important idea at what they're sort of aiming at an appropriate level, but it's just something that shouldn't be addressed at all unless you're going to do kind of what you're saying and you take that deep
Yeah,
dive.
it's because
So
they
it's
just want you to
tough.
memorize it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you struggle with that when you make your videos? Do you find that it's sort of like, oh, should I go deeper, or do you find that the right level comes naturally?
As of right now, no, I don't really struggle with it too much because I I totally remember what it feels like to be stupid. I still feel stupid all the time about stuff. So I feel like it's really easy for me to talk to myself and figure out like what actually, who I used to bounce ideas off a lot is my mom, who works in the medical field. She's not an idiot, but she used to ask really interesting questions when I was in college that I was like, oh shit. And actually hers was the boat floating thing. And I remember like explaining like displacement and all this stuff. And she's still like, I don't get it. And I got to the point where I was drawing molecules like zoomed in, trying to show her how that's moving. And that's when it like clicked for her. And I was like, oh, you got to go down. You got to get really granular when you're talking to an adult. I think with kids, you can just be like, yeah, water displacement and density, and they're just like, okay. But I think for an adult, you really have to be, because they know atoms exist. Pretty much every adult knows atoms. There's a small quantum world. We got Ant-Man and shit. Like I think at this point, everybody's like, oh, there's a little tiny universe right below us. And I think now humans don't realize that they are now expecting answers that are so close to the quantum world, they don't even realize it anymore because we're all becoming so accustomed to getting smaller and smaller and thinking more. Like I remember I did a video on why the sky is blue, and that actually gets down to a quantum level. And you could just be like Rayleigh scattering, and and this is how the lights are bound. But people are like, yeah, but why? They're like, but why? Why blue? Why? Because of that wavelength. And and that's when you start to like photons, and now we're down at the subatomic level, and that's when people are like, oh, okay, I can kind of get it. So the other thing I think with my mom was why clouds float if they're so heavy. That she just asked really good questions, and she'd be like, but why? You know what I mean? And I kind of practiced off of her for a while. I totally screwed it up. I feel bad. Some of the shit I probably told her, she was like, what the fuck?
No, I
because
did
this
you
is
one. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, like, this is an intelligent woman. I'm not talking to a child, and yet I have to find a way to kind of use childlike terms to explain something extraordinarily complex,
And there's, yeah, as you said, it's sort of irrespective of how educated or intelligent or whatever it is the person is. Like there's always a why. Even if you go all the way down to like the most sophisticated quantum, there's still this sort of like take a given of the universe. The speed of light is nearly 3.0 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. Okay, it is a reasonable question to ask why, and like it's so confusing because that's the type of question where it's like, in some sense at least, there isn't an answer to the question of why for that. It's sort of just the nature. There are things that are sort of just de facto attributes of the universe that you do have to accept to some extent, and I
that's
think people
actually
confuse those with the other ones.
that's one of the things that they use to justify the simulation theory is the speed of light. such an arbitrary number.
I don't know how you feel about that. I don't buy that just in the same way. I know this is something you talk about. Yeah. I mean, especially with our evolving understanding of the multiverse, or whatever our best conception of it is based on the standard model. I mean, it seems pretty. There would just be different combinations of those basic attributes that structure each reality.
I think honestly, I think the whole simulation thing, I get it. The odds are 50-50 because we can't prove one way or another. So that's usually what theory will sink into at some point. Well, not technically a theory.
I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's the other thing, is using the word theory. I've been getting better about that because, wow, the people who jump down your throat. But the one way I think we'd be able to figure it out is if the millionth digit of pi changes. That's when we're going to know something's up. Because in any sort of computerized system, even if it was organic somehow, once an error collects, it will snowball, and it will have to autocorrect itself. So something will have to come in and change it. So I think something like pi, like a billion digits out, would be the first clue. Like, if one of those numbers ever changes, we're totally in a simulation. So everybody keep an eye on that. Yeah, that's
I see what you're saying. I've never thought about that. Do you know if there's computers that are actually going and checking, X millionth digit to look for these? Is that sort of an accepted signal of?
It wouldn't be too difficult to check that. I've never worked with a program like that. I have never had any interest in pi. That was like a weird, I don't know, maybe
I see what you're saying, though. I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it wouldn't be too hard to match it.
I've had the same. I'm very biased in this respect. My master's degree was my thesis was about semiconductor quantum dots. So everything was.
So you were all on the. Were you on the superconductor drama last summer? Oh, what an ordeal!
Not to. What are you referring to? Maybe.
So I think it was last year, but there were two papers that came out within like 2 months of each other, two different parties, but one of them plagiarized everything, and the other just kind of like made their data up. Or and it had to get pulled. And normally those papers are checked. Well, they're supposed to be checked and double checked before they're published. And basically, like, nobody checked these guys. And one of them has a history of plagiarizing, and it was so much drama because we were like, oh, sweet, room temperature superconductors. Everybody was like really excited about the idea of that. And then it was I feel like it was last summer. It just felt like anybody who's interested in like material science, it was so much drama.
I do remember seeing in the recent past a bunch about room temperature semiconductor or superconductors, but I don't remember. I might have just missed the gossip because last year quantum dots won the Nobel Prize. So I think that was the main thing that was on my radar, because there was a lot of debate about whether the correct subset of leading scientists won. Because there's.
Oh shit!
I'll give you the long story short. The professor I worked under did his postdoc with a guy named Paul Alventos, who I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that name, but he's a professor at Berkeley, and he's one of the ones responsible for a lot of the developments that eventually led into QLED displays or a lot of interesting applications of quantum dots. But he didn't win. The people who won, and several of the obvious candidates have long since been dead, and the choice was a little bit debated. But at the same time, everybody was like just stoked that one, just to be in the field and have it be the Nobel Prize winning topic is like, cool. I guess I'm doing something cool.
I love how those guys,
validating.
They either win the prize like 30 years later after they die, or within 2 weeks. It's like, there is just no, I don't know.
Well, I think you have to be alive for the Nobel in that case, specifically for the Nobel.
I don't know much about the Nobel, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, I like the idea behind it. I think it's pretty great, but I also think the whole thing's a little overblown. I don't know. I think it's just, I don't know. I'm not really on the bandwagon. Like, I did make one video on one of the three of the winners last year, I think. I can't really remember. I think that was their work on, I think it was in quantum mechanics. I don't really remember. I have to research so much shit that I honestly think that I've learned more than, I have forgotten more than most people learn, I think, at this stage of my life. But, yeah, but I just remember like watching the whole ceremony and being like, I don't know, this isn't really like, It's a little
because I
peacock.
think a lot of people, academia is so, I'm sure you had the same experience, and I've talked to a bunch of people on the
Pretentious.
podcast about this. Pretentious is an understatement, and it's not
Yeah.
even just pretentious. It's like, again, I won't throw too many specific people under the bus, but I have worked
Oh,
in many
sorry.
labs where I have come, I'm working on a specific project, trying to collect data for that project. And in the midst of doing so, like a lot of my work was either spectroscopy or spectroelectrochemistry. So actually
Nice.
applying a voltage to inject charge and see how that affects the
See, that
photophysics.
sounds fun. That sounds way more fun than what I was going to do.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. I can give you a laundry list of reasons why it's super not fun and you shouldn't do it at the
Yeah,
same
I bet.
time.
I bet you
It's
can.
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. And this is one of them, is that I came, I would see interesting artifacts or surprises in the spectra, and I would come to my advisor and say, that's weird, right? Like, what do you think? And sometimes it would be a trivial answer where it's like, oh, the filter's in the way and it's clearly just a peak from whatever. And then other times it would be like, I don't know, that is weird, but like, did you get the data after that? It's like, well, no, I was trying to figure out like what this is. Like, it's pretty cool, no? And it's like, who cares? Like, that's not going to get the paper. And it's the classic publisher perish mentality where like everything comes down to how many papers and getting the impact of those papers as high as possible. And I've seen curiosity driven research, what continuously again and again is responsible for the major breakthroughs that change the world and better people's lives, are smothered because there's not a sexy paper title that uses, one of 20 keywords that people are searching for.
I do that a lot. I'll take those papers and I'll there was one that I did for the Advanced Propulsion Lab on the warp drive a couple of weeks ago, and they reached out to me. Which I mean, like I've gone over a lot of papers before where I've actually read the whole thing. Which, man, when it's not your field, it is pretty brutal. It takes you a long time. I had to read that paper like 10 or 20 times. I mean, it was really tough for me, but still, like, you get through it. you know and they reached out and they were like, thank you for the attention. And I don't think you really realize like how important the platform is for a lot of these labs. That's why the show that I want to make is literally going to take these dry ass papers that the common man cannot understand or doesn't care about because they don't understand the impact, and making it relevant to people's lives. That's the trick. You got to make it relevant to people's lives. Like, why does this matter to you? What's the cool invention that could come out of this in 50 years? Right? You go above 50 years and people are like, I'll probably be dead. So, but I feel like 50 years is the sweet spot. But yeah, it's a lot of like, who gives a shit? My thesis, half of my professors were like, who gives a shit? And I was like, because if we design a wormhole, this major problem is going to be a bottleneck for the whole system. So it sounds stupid, but if we don't know the size of things through a wormhole, we're going to hit them. And it was just, but they were like, who gives a shit about wormholes? And it was, I don't know, it was just, I'm like, they cared 100 years ago, so maybe we should care today.
I don't get it. I don't get that. I find that like, yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have, a particularly keen interest on things that I expect to affect me in my lifetime. But when
Of
people are
course,
just
yeah.
like, fuck it, I'll be dead. It's like, do you just have this like genocidal sentiment about humanity
Yeah.
then? Like you just care so long as you're in the frame? I
What's
get
that?
it. Like,
What's Murakami, that writer. Oh my God, he's like one of the best writers, but I think I always butcher his last name. It's like, it begins with an
um,
H, his first name, and his last name I think is Murakami.
sounds like a
But
Japanese writer.
yeah, and he one of my favorite lines he ever wrote was, "Deep in their hearts, all men want to see the world end," or something like that. And I was like,
Miyazaki, maybe?
no,
You're
no,
talking
it
about
wasn't.
like, oh, okay.
No, I wasn't an artist. Oh my God, now
Oh, okay.
I gotta know. I would go. I have like a bunch of his books too. I think it's like Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm gonna butcher this. Haruki Murakami. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a writer. He wrote one Q84. That one was really popular for a while. His books are so simple. I mean, the storyline, if you were to like see how it's plotted out, you'd be like, that looks boring. But his writing is so captivating because he has little one-line winners like that all the time. Because it's true. It's like, yeah, why do we all want the like hope waiting for the world to
Yeah.
end? And
There's
that's
a
been going on here for a
weird.
while.
And I wish, again, circling back to sort of the beginning of our conversation, people kind of leave science in isolation to a lot of these things. And obviously it can be dangerous. You have to be extremely careful with when you start merging that and morals and ethics and evaluating the human condition. But
Oh, I try not to touch that.
you need to some extent.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I become convinced that like it's a matter of doing it correctly, not whether to do it or not to do it.
Are you
Because
calling me out right now?
no, I'm not.
No,
No, I'm
you're
not.
right.
But it's tough because yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because like I mean, it's interesting too because I feel a lot of people who have. I've been very fortunate to get a lot of education, a lot of really good education. Like I'm not particularly smart. I've just gone to a lot of great schools and had parents who shoved books down. Yeah, like you're just like, oh, parents shoving books down my face. Of course, at some point you're going to collect some knowledge in your brain. But I really do feel oftentimes the people who are probably the most qualified to say something are usually the ones that kind of don't. And I don't think it's because of I think it's imposter syndrome. Man, I think we all have it to just some extent. I think there's a lot of scientists who are like, who am I to say anything about geopolitical issues or philosophy? Because they know so much about their field that they know most people don't know. So the assumption is, oh, it must be that complex for all this other stuff. And I don't know anything about it. So who am I to vocalize an opinion when I can barely vocalize an opinion on my own field that I know so much more about? So it's like the smarter you get or the more knowledge you obtain, man, the dumber you really do feel.
It's the Dunning-Kruger, just the other end of the spectrum that people typically refer to, you know? It's
Yeah,
like, again, go to an academic conference, every sentence is prefaced with, insofar as far as we
as
know,
we
based on
know.
current condition, it's very, very carefully. And yeah, I do think that it's obviously that's great. That's what you want scientists to sort of embody, but it does have some negative externalities for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why I went as far as the master's as well, and same thing. Kind of played with the PhD. Thought I was going to do it. Still feel like one day I'll hop back into it.
yeah.
But I
If
actually
you
think
hit
it's
the
an
lottery,
advantage. Yeah. Well, first of all, that, but
yeah,
it's an advantage because I think not to say if you get the PhD you're condemned to hyper specialization and you're not going to be able to weigh in otherwise. But I do think the master's is sort of a sweet spot to
yeah,
retain your interdisciplinary heart as a scientist, and not get weighed down and not know too much.
yeah. It was kind of amazing how much you think you learned so much in undergrad, and then you're like, oh, this hole keeps going. Depending on what you study, it either spreads out for more fields or it starts to really narrow down. And it was just like, but yeah, my thesis. I'm so glad I ended up not doing it because there's a part of me that's kind of like, do I want to solve this problem? Because do I want humanity to spread right now? I don't know. I had a huge, yeah,
I know what you mean. There's an apathy. That's how I feel trying to go the way. I mean, needless to say, I think you're much farther along the successful path than I am. But in a world where I think like in a world where if I'm given the opportunity, be a big player in science communication, or, again with a similar magical guarantee, get to become a scientist making the contributions that somebody like the science communicator would be talking about, which would I choose? And I don't know. I don't know. And I feel I go back and forth. I think the content creation, communication, education thing is so important and so much more fun. But then I feel but I'm not actually not doing something. I need to contribute. I need to be the one doing the thing, and back and forth and back and forth.
Oh, I always feel like this. I'm a joke because I mean I can't speak for the scientific community or tech or engineers, but in the math community, yeah, what I do is not helping anybody or doing anything. And one of my friends who works in entertainment. I had mentioned this to him, and he's pretty successful. So I don't know what I was expecting him to say, but I was like, yeah, I feel you have to understand that in my world, in the math world, I'm a joke. This isn't what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to just stay in a little room and just with my research and like never see the light of day, only come outside at night like a vampire. Like that was supposed to be my life. And this, it's just, God, what am I even contributing? And honestly, he said something that completely transformed my perspective on this. And he was like, you're an entertainer. And I was like, wait, can you elaborate? And he's like, you're an entertainer now. He's like, yeah, I mean, if people learn something great, that's the subject of your work, but you are first and foremost an entertainer now. And that completely transformed my perspective on all this. I was like, oh, okay, all right, this is instead of this feeling like I'm not contributing anything to the math community, it's like, yeah, I'm not, and that's
I'm not
not my
supposed
role.
to. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's sort of a freeing perspective.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you just have to, and again, it's the opportunity. Luck is opportunity meets preparation. You don't always get to choose, I think, where your luck leads. And obviously, this is more of what I was supposed to do. And maybe I left the door open for somebody else to do what I thought I was going to be doing, and they're more qualified for it. I was definitely not the smartest kid in my class, that's for sure. So I was just probably the loudest. So I mean, you take what you're good at, and it's like, yeah, just take your little slice of contribution. And if I make a video that impacts somebody who works on something in 10 years, maybe that was my whole purpose in life. Was that one kid in like Montgomery, Alabama, or some shit? You know what I mean? You never know. Like, yeah. So imposter syndrome, man, is the worst.